morning. My name is Annika Rosa. I'm the Business Development Manager at Society of Women Engineers, and on behalf of SWEET, I would like to welcome you to our plenary panel, Ethics and the Human Rights in the Design of Technology. Before we get started with the plenary, I'm going to take a moment to just share some updates about SWEET. SWEET's membership continues to grow year over year, with our current membership at over 40,000 members globally. We are proud to serve this incredible community of determined individuals. Over the last 2 years, our SWEET Next program has also grown immensely. SWEET Next is a way for girls 18 and under to become a part of the SWEET family. There is no cost to join, and girls have access to scholarships, events, and exclusive content. Currently, over 7,000 people have joined SWEET Next, and to date, we have over 230 SWEET Next clubs in 33 different countries. Also, some of our We Local conferences have Design Labs, which is an outreach experience challenge to better their community and designed to encourage girls to choose and study a career in engineering. To learn more, you can go to sweetnext.sweet.org. And finally, in 2020, we will host 7 We Local conferences. So they will be in San Diego, California, Salt Lake City, Utah, Raleigh, North Carolina, Buffalo, New York, Bangalore, India, and London, England, and Des Moines, Iowa. These conferences will include a lot of similar content that we have at We19, as well as recruiting opportunities, and as I mentioned, some of those SWEET Next programming. And then regarding just the global activities, SWEET has really expanded its presence over the last couple years, and to date we have 56 global affiliates and almost 90 ambassadors in 18 different countries. We're continuing with our global growth and offering our award-winning programming here in the US. We have a lot of other fantastic programs and opportunities going on, but I just wanted to share a few of the highlights before we get started. And you can always catch the latest on our blog, altogether.sweet.org. And then we would like to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, Johnson Controls, a Corporate Partnership Council member, for their generous support and sponsorship of this plenary, and give them an opportunity to share why they partner with SWEET. So please join me in welcoming Grady Crosby, Vice President, Public Affairs and Chief Diversity Officer, and President of the Johnson Controls Foundation, to the stage.
Good morning. Half of you all are having a good morning. How about that? So let me try it again. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, fantastic. As was stated, my name is Grady Crosby with Johnson Controls, and we are just peacock proud to sponsor this plenary session on this very important topic. Obviously, it's important because of the number of you all that have shown this morning to express your interest. And one of the things that we were asked to do is just talk a little bit about why we are here. We're here for any number of reasons, and most of which are sitting in this audience. Johnson Controls, some of you may be familiar with Johnson Controls. I always get the fact that I tell people I work at Johnson Controls, and they tend to say, something about that baby powder, but wrong company. It's not Johnson & Johnson, it's Johnson Controls. We are a technology company. We are in the business of transforming environments for our people, where people live, work, learn, play, and stay. Everything from optimizing building performance to enhancing safety and security in buildings to maximizing comfort. All of that comes under the auspices of Johnson Controls, and some of those environments include healthcare environments and data centers and universities and transportation portals, all of which are verticals for Johnson Controls to install our intelligent technological infrastructure to those environments to enhance people's experiences. We call ourselves the power behind our customers' mission, and with over 105,000 global associates in 150 different countries around the world, we are hoping that one day, if you visit us down in booth 1614 later on today, that you can be a part of the power behind the mission as well. And we're also just very, we connect so much with this theme of this conference for SWEET, where you all are thinking about living and learning and leading. And And so often we are always, kind of pushed to what's next. And people are been telling you since grade school, you got to get ready for high school. And in high school, they say you got to get ready for college. And you get there and they want you to get ready for your professional career. But at some point, you got to live, right? You got to kind of enjoy the moment. You got to take the time to smell the flowers along the way. And so that kind of comes with the idea as you live, you kind of have to raise your head and understand what's going on around you. And as you are going through whatever experience you're going through, that you're going to have to grow through it as well. So you might as well learn something since you are there. And then to really transform that entire experience you've lived, and you continue to learn and grow as you're living, to share that through your leadership with someone else, to bring them along the way, kind of completes that entire circle. So to live and learn and ultimately to lead. Education is great. Knowledge is powerful, but wisdom is truly the application of that knowledge. And so we're looking for folk who understand that along life's journey, you got to keep your head up. You got to be conscious of the moment and understand that this is an opportunity for me to grow and learn, that I don't know it all, that I'm open to new ideas, that the mind that is allowed to be bent will never return to its original form, and then to be able to share that through your leadership. And that's what we're all about at Johnson Controls. And I think you're going to see that in this panel today as well, a fascinating topic. This is the reason why I know that AI will not take over the world, because we find bias even in the smartest of AI applications. Why? Because behind it all are people, and behind people are their experiences. So somebody still has to check the technology to make sure that it is conscious of ethics and human rights. So I'm excited to listen to what the panel has in store for us today. I'm excited for you, excited for the opportunity for you to one day be an associate with me at Johnson Controls and continue to help us be the power behind our customers' mission. Have a great experience here at SWE 19. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Grady and Johnson Controls. And before I introduce today's moderator, I want to point out that you can ask questions through the WE19 app. And there should be some instructions here on the screen, but you just choose in the app, just choose a session and click the questions. So with that said, I just want to introduce today's moderator, Coleen Scholl. Coleen Scholl is the Senior Vice President with HDR, an architecture and engineering firm headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska. Coleen directs engineering activities for 1,200 technical staff working on industrial projects and manages the QA, QC, and risk assessment processes. Prior to joining HDR in 2012, Coleen spent 20 years with engineering, procurement, and construction firms involved with the engineering, construction, and commissioning of power plants around the world. Coleen also served as the Society of Women Engineers Board of Directors for 4 years, including Society President in FY16. So welcome, Coleen.
Thank you, Monica. I want to start by thanking you all for joining us today. I think this is a really interesting topic. Our discussions today are going to focus on ethics and human rights in the design of technology. And as engineers, when we're looking to design something, design a system, design a piece of technology, we're really focused on function, on end use, on solving a problem by creating something. But as autonomous and intelligent systems continue to become more pervasive, I think we really need to shift our focus a little bit more to ensuring that this technology operates in a way that's human-centric. It focuses on the values that we have. It's beneficial to both people, to the environment. It's sustainable. I did a lot of research trying to really see where the industry stands related to this topic. And I found that some of our technical organizations like IEEE have really launched some global initiatives focused on coming up with some recommendations and some guidance to industry, but we're really still at the forefront of really establishing what we need to do here and what we should be doing as engineers, as scientists. So I think this is going to be a really great discussion that we're going to have with our panelists today. They're going to tell us a little bit about how their organizations are striving to be social responsible. We're going to talk a little bit about the dangers of ignoring free expression, privacy, security, and we'll talk a little bit about how new technology is being developed with these considerations in mind. I got to pay more attention to my mic, don't I? So I'll ask each of the panelists to start by introducing themselves. Tell us a little bit about you, your organization, and how this topic relates to what you do. So would you like to lead us off?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Renita Dixon. I'm from ITW. Please come visit us at the Career Fair. I've been with ITW for 23 years, and I started off as an engineer, and now my role is product stewardship and sustainability engineer. And this topic encompasses everything that I do, because you can't be a responsible company or be sustainable if you're not mindful of human rights.
I'm Nicole Karlebach, and I head up the Business and Human Rights program at Verizon, and hopefully you'll come check out our booth and my colleagues who are here today. Verizon is a leading provider of internet access services, and we also provide digital platforms through our Verizon Media business. My team's job is to look at how our business is intersecting through its decisions across all of those areas with human rights issues ranging from privacy to free expression and more. As Coleen said, it's an exciting time to be doing this work, so I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Annika Rosa, and I am a distinguished engineer with IBM. I am the CTO for the global AI and cognitive and AI practice, and I have been working with IBM for 25 years now, but specifically in this AI space since 2008. And I see tremendous changes of how just we learn to apply this new technology. And now I'm in the position of leadership where I actually live and breathe our motto here, the live, learn, and lead, because I am leading the people who are designing these technologies and applying it to our clients. I am responsible for the delivery, and I have to make sure that everything that we do is ethical, that we're considering, that we promote fairness, we take a look at how we apply data rights, how we apply privacy, and make sure that it's very stringently in everything that we do.
Good morning. My name is Toni Hickey. I'm Deputy General Counsel and Chief IP Counsel with Cummins. For those of you that are not familiar with our company, we are the largest independent diesel engine manufacturer in the world. We are now celebrating our 100th anniversary. In my role, I work with our engineering and product development teams to really think about sustainability in the context of environmental sustainability. So if you think about our products, what we deliver into the marketplace, you are probably likely aware that we have a carbon footprint, that we are very diligent about and thoughtful about what our carbon footprint looks like from a manufacturing perspective, but also from a design perspective. And I work with those teams to facilitate that process.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for introducing yourselves. So I do have some questions that I'll get us started with, but we want to hear your questions. We want the panelists to answer them. So please, as Monica mentioned, go into the app, get your questions submitted, and please, while we're doing that, we'll get us started. So Nicole, my first question's for you. So how does your organization approach evaluating human rights or ethical impacts on new and emerging technologies?
So what we do at Verizon is we take a structured approach to this work. And really, the Business and Human Rights program, the function that I lead, this core team, had its origins back in one of our brands, Yahoo. It was created in 2008. And so we're building on really 10 years of foundation for thinking about how our business decisions, whether it be product design, development, deployment, and use, impact and intersect with important human rights issues. And I think, Coleen, you said at the outset that as engineers, you're very much focused on the end user. In our team, that is also very much our focus. We're thinking about what is the impact of our decisions and our technology, our products, our services on people. So how do we go about doing that across a massive organization? And Verizon is quite a complex and large organization. What we've done is to set up a structured approach. So we have our dedicated team, which is our core unit, where we have human rights professionals who are available to give guidance and insight on different questions that come up. It's sort of the central point for considering these issues in our company. But our team can't do it alone. So what we've created is a virtual team throughout our business from cross-functional areas, including engineers, product teams, lawyers, communications and marketing teams. Those are our allies, our partners for discussing what issues are coming up, what issues they're seeing in the context of their work that might intersect with human rights issues, privacy, free expression, to a certain extent security, discrimination and bias, any number of human rights issues. They can raise those issues to our team. It's also our place for sharing information so that they can be thinking and on the front lines of considering these impacts. What we do in terms of how we actually get across the issues, so we're looking at, as we do this work, the international law standards and norms for human rights, and that's really where we ground our thinking in. That comes from high-level UN treaties and other often government-signed documents. But we also have a benefit of looking at the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And as a company, we've committed to operating with respect for those principles. And really what that does is gives us an opportunity to look at what is our business responsibility to respect human rights and how do we carry that out in our day-to-day functions. So part of what our team does is run a process where we do human rights impact assessments or ongoing due diligence from a human rights perspective. And that means embedding into processes and functions across the business, whether it be product reviews or design development or strategic transactions, partnerships, and thinking about what are the issues and the questions we want to surface from a human rights perspective. We embed that into the existing processes that might exist from the legal department or through other departments, and we're able to then surface issues and bring them up for consideration and hopefully consistent decision making. Now, some of that work gets very challenging at the moment that we're in, where technology is developing quickly, there's a rapid pace. We want to get across it as fast as we can. So what we're having to do sort of from a human rights perspective and the discussion that's gone on in the business and human rights space in the tech area is about how do you keep pace with these traditional practices like performing human rights impact assessments of technology while also being able to make sure that you're doing it quickly enough and at scale. And so that's the type of work that we're kind of very much focused on today. You know, how do we work with teams? How can we get more and more people across our business sensitized to these issues and working with us? And the final piece of our approach is really engagement, and that includes that internal work across teams as well as external work to connect with tech and human rights experts and others who are really following these issues and starting to think ahead and understand what our impacts are going to be. We really want to be feeding that into our company. So those are sort of the characteristics of our approach.
Great, thanks for sharing. So my next question is for Annika. What areas of technical focus do you consider when designing AI systems?
So in IBM, everywhere where we design, we have an ethical and human rights focus. So applying that to AI is just a new application. As you probably know, IBM has been around for over 100 years, and we have about 360,000 people worldwide working for the company. So we have to follow a very stringent approach in everything that we do. And it comes down to about 5 key principles. And the first one is accountability. And this is making sure that everybody who is in any way designing these AI systems, whether it's a designer, a developer, or DevOps, or just anybody who is touching or maintaining this system, are aware of what they need to do and aware of how they need to promote these principles. So we do quite a bit of education and making sure that when we have new personnel, that they understand that everything has to be accountable, and every decision that's made can be it's traceable. It's important how this is made, and that leads into the second key point, which is transparency. When we started to make these AI systems, at first it was more like a black box. You ask a question, and here is an answer. The magic happens in the middle, and this is the answer because the system said so, right? So this cannot really fly. At first it was novelty and interesting, but everything has to be explainable and traceable. For example, we have a large banking customer where they're using virtual assistants in an agent assist situation. So somebody walks up to this agent and asking a question, and they may not know the answer, so they're looking for a virtual assistant asking the question to try to provide the answer to the user. So this has to be done in a very fast manner, and it has to be editable, accountable, so that you say, okay, why this decision was made, so you could trace back that did you give the right answer, and why did you give this answer, and how did you come up with this answer. So everything based on what models were used, what sort of decisions were made, it's the audit processes there. The data and privacy rights are very, very important, and it's coming up with our clients when we designing the system, who owns the data that we are training the systems with. And there are some data that you could take from one engagement to another. For example, we're doing a number of IT support virtual assistants. Many people have problems with password resets. How many ways can you say, oh, I need to change my password? That's, it's not really something that owned by a company. Everybody is using the same words, like, I can't log in, I can't do this, help me with my password. That's, absolutely, you could take from one engagement to the other. But when you do something that is related to a business process that owned by a client, this is absolutely owned by the client, and you cannot take it from one engagement to another. This is their right, and we have to make sure that it stays with them. The data that they are gaining, the information that they are gaining, their processes, it's protected, and it's available only to them. And finally, just the awareness that we have to promote fairness and take out the bias from the results. And bias is a really important problem, because you could train the systems, you make sure that in the training situation it's working perfectly, but you have to make sure that once it goes into deployment and it's with the clients, then they still are able to, the system itself able to flag that could be a bias and promote that we have to watch out for that, and not just by somebody making decisions afterwards, but the system itself should flag these problems if these problem occurs because of the data.
Great. So we have a lot of engineers, future engineers in this room today. So Toni, I'll ask you this question. How do we train our engineers and technologists to consider the ramifications of the innovations they create?
Wow. So you gave me the hard question. You skipped my first easy question and went to the hard one. So I love coming to conferences like this because it gives me the opportunity to talk about a 100-year company that people maybe view as a diesel engine producer. But the reality is that everything that every company on this stage is doing, we're doing at Cummins. But we don't have a face to it, I think, the way that IBM and others are doing that. So I love coming to talk and to share what we think about with our engineers. So I think the first thing is we're a little bit different, maybe not so different from ITW, but we're a little different in that when we think about human rights in the context of the products that we place into the marketplace, we're thinking about primarily two issues. We're thinking about environmental sustainability, because we believe that our obligation to preserve the environment, particularly when we consider that that the carbon footprint in the world, the entire carbon footprint, that about 1% of that is attributable directly to our products. So we take our obligation to have environmentally sustainable products enter the market, we take that very seriously. And so when we think about training our engineers, it's really about aligning our engineers to understand that that is an initiative, a goal, a strategy, and a mission for our company. What makes it a little bit easier for us is that we have a regulatory environment that drives us there. So if you think about what's going on in the world with emissions standards right now, we're looking at 1 billion or about 1 billion people that have fairly stringent emissions-related requirements that have been implemented at the national level. In the next 2 years, that'll be close to 3 billion people on the planet. And so what that means is that every product that goes out the door, our company is subject to that regulatory environment. So our engineers are actually designing to meet those regulatory obligations. So you can pull, I obviously work in the IP area, you can pull a lot of our patent-related filings in the engine space, and you'll see that we are driving towards fuel economy, we are driving towards a reduction in the number of particle matters and emissions-related requirements that get introduced into the market. And so this year we introduced our 2 millionth engine, and when that was 2018. And so when we looked at a 20-year period, that engine and the number of carbon-related particles, et cetera, greenhouse gas effect, it went down by 98%. And that was all because of how our engineers think about how we drive to that standard that our company meets. On the other side, I think one thing that I always like to point out to people is that if you have one of our products and you're using one of our products, the chances are I know where you are, I know what you're doing with the product. So if you're driving a Dodge Ram and it has a Cummins engine in it, I know how fast you're going, where you stopped, where you've gotten gas. I also have your name and probably all the other associated information. So we take our obligation to protect the privacy of that information very seriously, and we manage globally in every environment, even though we're not required to. We manage to the GDPR standards in the EU because we believe those to be the most stringent. So then that goes into, I think, back to your question, how do you train your engineers to think about that? I don't think it would be possible if we didn't have leadership in our organization that constantly has this discussion with our engineers, and if we didn't build that rigor into our processes and procedures and into our, what we refer to as our product introduction, so our value product introduction and product preceding technology process, where we look at these questions during the design phase. And so I think it's because we have the message and the mission from our leaders, we have it built into our processes and procedures, and then we are a Six Sigma company, so we measure our effectiveness, but then we also have the regulatory environment, and we try to meet and always exceed the regulatory environment guidelines. And so if you look at emissions-related requirements around the world, Cummins is always, I won't say always because I'm a lawyer, so I shouldn't hedge it that way, but generally, more likely than not, we're the first company to meet those emission standards globally.
Wonderful, thank you. So Renita, I know this is a question that's come in quite a bit from our audience, as well as being one of the questions that I have. What can we as consumers do to promote organizations making more changes to improve our ecological impact?
Well, coming from ITW and how we choose to innovate, it all starts with meeting our customers' pain points. So companies are paying attention to our customer base. So as consumers, what we can do for starter is demand that we have products that do lessen environmental impact. Not only demand it, but be willing to pay for it, because I know many of you, you've been in a store, you've been side by side, you've got one product, maybe an organic apple, for example, and a conventionally grown one. You know that the organic one hasn't been grown with chemical fertilizers and pesticides, but it costs maybe 3 times more. You have to be willing sometimes to make those choices, if possible, to pay a little bit more to support companies in developing and further putting these products on the market. Also, we have to do our part to complete the circular economy. So if that means wiping out a container before putting in a recycling bin, or maybe even in my case, living in Chicago, we have curbside recycling, but there's some items there we have to pack up and take maybe to the other side of town for recycling. We have to support in that method as well. Another thing we can do is be more mindful when we make purchases. Meaning, think about what you want to use something for. Don't necessarily go for something because it's cheap, especially now the holidays are coming up. Don't take that pressure and just make the quick choice. Think about how long you can keep something, how long you can reuse it and pass it on instead of just tossing it. And that helps to lessen our ecological footprint as well.
Thank you. So I've got a lot of great questions coming in, so I urge you to keep submitting them, and I will try to get as many of them as possible to our panelists. This one's coming in multiple forms, so I'm going to ask it to the panel, and please, whomever wants to answer, tackle it, please speak up. So companies have a lot of things to balance. They have a financial obligation to their stakeholders. They have, ethical responsibilities. How do you balance making these ethical choices when it really might impact the bottom line in a negative way? How do you make that decision? Anybody want to take that one?
I can kick off. That's a good question and a hard one at the same time. I think it goes back a little bit to what you were just saying about kind of the tone from the top and the executive commitment to these issues. So at Verizon, we have the benefit of our CEO having said that we are a socially responsible business and we're committed to that. That means that we're committed to different stakeholders, and that includes shareholders, but it also includes employees, customers, and importantly, society. And so that is fundamentally how our business is looking at this type of challenge. We know from some of the history of our products and our services that at times it can actually impede your ability to operate as a business and to be successful in offering your products and your services around the world if you aren't taking account of these important human rights or ethical or societal considerations. And so that is part of what drives our company's work. Our brand, where I said this team started, Yahoo, had some early experiences around the world, including trying to operate in markets like China and other places where there may be differences in terms of understandings around international human rights norms. Those type of experiences have really informed how we think about how we can be successful in the market today. So for us as a company, it involves, I think, that tone from the top, the understanding that these issues are critical in order to be a successful business, and kind of combining all of that.
I agree with what you said, especially with the change coming from the leadership. So if you're challenged with coming up with a product that does lessen the environmental impact, if your leader comes in and says specifically, we're going to focus on this problem and not worry about the numbers and let the numbers come later, it frees you up to produce and come up with solutions without that sticking in that one box, and it makes the hugest difference.
Yeah, and I echo what you said. You know, again, it's very important that everybody is aligned in these principles. For example, at IBM, we have one of our key principles is client ethos. That means that we have to make sure that we are acting in our client's best interest, and everything that we design and develop is the client's best interest in mind. So we do have to protect these rights without question, without failing in every engagement that we do.
I think just as an employee of an organization, I think there are two things that I'd keep in mind. So in 2018, our company had to certify 144 different engine models in 36 different countries to more than 50 different standards. And so when we think about this context of what trade-offs we have to make when we go into those different markets, or what trade-offs we're making during the design phase, how our leadership team looks at this question is how our engineers and other employees are going to live up to that standard. And so our leadership team has been very clear in not only setting the mission and the goals to actually reduce our carbon footprint, but we issue an annual sustainability report and we tell our shareholders what we are actually measuring, whether we're measuring water usage at our plants, what we're measuring so that we can lower our impact on the environment. So I think measure and disclose what matters is important. But I also think now, particularly for this environment, employees have a lot of power in driving to their leadership teams what's important to them. And so if you look at the environment now, you have engineers that are walking out saying, you did not tell me that my product would be used in this way. So I'm not going to continue to work until you make a disclosure. And that's something that I don't think, at least in my 25 years of practicing, that I've seen where employees have been willing to walk out the door and say, you owe it to me, you have an obligation to me as an employee to tell me what I'm designing is going to be used and consistent with my personal morals and what you present to the marketplace is consistent. Because I always tell people, I started my practice with the federal government, I moved into private practice with a firm. I never expected to go in-house with a company, but I went in-house with a company that I believe shared my values. So I would feel a sense of betrayal if our company was doing something that's not consistent with that. And so I feel like in this environment, employees have a lot of power to say, I joined this company and I'm designing in this way, so please don't betray that.
Yes. So I think a number of you mentioned a human rights impact assessment. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and how it's done?
I can kick off on that one. So actually, our brand Yahoo was the first company in the tech space, the tech sector, to pioneer a human rights impact assessment for this industry. And what it consists of essentially, and the same model as the one that we use today across all of Verizon, is looking at the international law standards and norms for human rights and identifying what those are, looking at what law, policy, or regulation we're dealing with in any given business decision. It might be multiple or it may be a single instance depending on what we're trying to do. Looking at what the business question is and what the business would like to do, what its objectives are, and then thinking through applying that human rights lens to figure out what are going to be the risks of this initiative or business decision, and what are the opportunities, and how can we mitigate those risks if they do exist in as practical and pragmatic a way as possible. And also, how can we maximize that opportunity if we do identify it? So Yahoo was the first to do this. It did it when it was entering the Vietnam market back in 2008. We've since published our method for doing this work on our website. And I think the interesting thing for kind of how we're thinking about taking forward this human rights impact assessment model today is just that with the pace and change of technology and the way that our business iterates constantly, especially through the design phase of technology, how do we keep pace with that and still apply a rigorous standard of review from a human rights perspective? And so we've moved into a model where we sort of think about this ongoing human rights due diligence concept, which essentially means sort of what I was saying before a little bit about embedding into existing processes, working with teams on an ongoing basis so we can surface these issues in real time, and make sure that we're kind of doing this on an ongoing basis, not on a single instance, only. But when an issue becomes a big one, we still have this human rights impact assessment tool to rely on. So I think that's the challenge and the tension for a lot of companies today. How do you keep those traditional practices rigorous while also making it fit for purpose against today's pace?
So this question's for Enikő directly, but I think all of you might have some ability to weigh in on this one. How do we design AI to really minimize bias? We talked a lot about bias here. How do we address that in the design?
Sure. So one of the things that we have been doing is sort of establishing what bias is. We spent a lot of research time just to identify what different biases there are, and there are some common ones like age and gender. For example, if you look at the data that is training the more common machine learning algorithms, it's coming from people, it's coming from society at large. So for example, if you look at machine translation, and my mother tongue is Hungarian, and Hungarian is one of those languages where there is no gender in the third person. So let's say you have an English sentence and you say she's an engineer, and then you put it into a machine translator, one of these common services, and it translates it into Hungarian. It comes back with, with the genderless third person and with the word for engineer. Now you take that Hungarian sentence and you're trying to translate it back to English now, it's going to come back as he's an engineer. And that's because, at large, the data that it was trained on, there are more male engineers than there are females. But this exists in the training. So you have to make sure that you design that. So you identify what are the different biases that you want to look out for. And then you, with everything that you design, you create a control group. Obviously it's like in every other area, you have a reference group and a control group, and that you want to monitor. And then you make sure that when you're using your models, that evaluate how it's working for the two different groups. And it's not a simple black and white thing that, okay, I'm just looking at gender and gender is a problem, or age is a problem. Let's say you have an insurance company that are, the favorable outcomes is that a claim that people make is approved, and an unfavorable outcome when the claims are rejected. And let's say you have two groups where the people are, say, under 35, and then people who are over 35. And it could very well come up that the under 35 group claims have been rejected more than the over 35. And if you look at just based on one aspect, the age, it might come up as, oh, this is a biased system because it's clearly rejecting based on the age. But you also have to look at why is a claim rejected? What are the other components? Maybe that different groups are making false claims. Maybe different groups are maybe what are the other components that are affecting these rejections? So one thing that we do with these models is to take a look. What we say it's data perturbation, so that we swap a representative from the group that we are trying to monitor with the reference group, and then see what happens if you keep everything else the same. Does the model still rejects the problem, this claim? And if it does, then it was about the age. But if it doesn't reject because now it's considering other things, then it comes up, okay, well, this is okay. It's okay to reject because there are other issues that you have to consider. So there are all these different areas where, so you have to identify, what this problem is, and you have to identify how the model is acting, what are the, and I talked about it earlier, the transparency, why the model is acting in a way that it's acting. So when you deploy these systems in production, you want to make sure that there is, some sort of a audit model that takes a look, okay, now I'm getting more data, I'm getting new information, am I still acting the same way I was trained, and should I flag if there is differences that are coming up, or should I say, there are possible bias here, but not necessarily, and when do we flag this to the actual end users? But it has to be built into the system. Just because you think about it at design time, it doesn't mean that it's automatically act that way. And this is when you design something, you have to be complete, and you have to consider it from the full life cycle of what happens at the design stage, at the development stage, and when you actually deliver and you are in production, because you have to still maintain this rigorous watch for the system. You cannot just kind of let it go and have the machine work on its own.
Very interesting. So, Toni, I think you touched on this a little bit, but I want to throw the conversation out to the whole panel. You're all international, global companies. With differences in human rights standards and ethical standards and morality standards around the world, how do you balance that when you're doing work and producing products for different countries all over the world where they may have different standards or kind of different codes that they live by? How do you balance that? Anybody want to start?
Well, I can just take it for a minute, but so the way that we think about this is we ground our work in the international law standards and norms for human rights, which are translated through those UN guiding principles I talked about before. And the reason why we do that is exactly to the point of your question, which is that there can be different conceptions, different understandings of things like privacy in different markets around the world. And so we look to the kind of the international foundations for this work as much as possible. And that leads us to apply this international human rights framework to our decision making. I think that the challenge, of course, comes that we are operating in different markets around the world. We do have to respect the law where we operate, and so that is why, at its heart, we have this program that's able to help us think through when there is a conflict or a challenge. How do we think about that? How do we grapple with that challenge? It also can be useful that we've made commitments to the international human rights framework and to these UN guiding principles when we do operate in different markets around the world, and they wonder, why have you done X or Y? It's because we've made these global commitments.
I think our approach at Cummins is similar. So in 2017, we signed on to the UN Global Impact, approach to looking at, I think it's like 14 or 15 related factors that you look at. So you look at the poverty rates in a certain country, or you look at education availability or education access. And so we identified as part of that those areas where we believed as a company strategically we could make a difference. And so when we look at environmental sustainability, I've spoken a lot about that, and we look at what targets we're setting and how even if we go into a country or region where they have not passed a stringent emissions regulation, we still deliver into that product marketplace products where the emission standard has already been raised. So for example, in the US, we have a pretty high emission standard. China and India are coming on board with those emission standards now in 2020 and 2024. And so products that we deliver into those marketplaces, we've already taken it up to the EU standard, which is pretty high. It's the highest in the world. And then we also just look also at other factors that are part of the UN Global Impact. So we look at what it means when women are actively engaged, involved, and educated in their society, and the correlation that that has to how successful either a company or a country is in emerging from what we look at with the poverty index. And so we have a huge initiative with Girls Inc. nationally, internationally, and we devote a significant amount of resources to that partnership. And then we look at what we're doing in certain regions where we operate in the world. And so, for example, we have a huge initiative in India where we have partnered and built a school for women engineers. And we also facilitate a lot of things around training, development, and access to projects within our trade center our R&D center in India, because it's our second largest R&D center in the world. And so what we do there is ensure that we have access to projects, that there is the ability for women engineers in that environment to be supported and to actually be promoted to leadership roles at that tech center. So we relate all of that back to the UN Global Impact scheme, and we rate that every year. So if you want to see how we're doing, it's in our sustainability report.
Well, ITW is different in that we are a decentralized company, which means that we do have a human rights policy, and it takes key points from international policies. But our divisions have the ability to establish their own ways of dealing with their local issues because they understand it better. We have operations in over 50 countries, and it's very difficult, as you mentioned, to have policies that affect all these different areas and allow you to operate in the same way, because it's really a challenge. So we rely on our divisions and allow them to do it.
Thank you. So you all talked a lot about your own companies and what you're doing internally, but as you well know, companies don't operate in a vacuum. We all have large supply chains. How do you ensure that your supply chains, the companies in those chains, are also adopting some of the same practices or principles as you are in your organizations?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Well, we've established a framework for our supply chain. They're expected to sign a supplier code of conduct, which is in line with the ITW code of conduct. We also have terms and conditions where we expect them to follow those. We have audits of some suppliers, some key suppliers, and we also rely on third parties to help us out with that.
I would say our approach is similar. We have a supplier code of conduct as well that talks about a range of different issues. And we also conduct audits and reviews, and in particular, our human rights team works with a team within kind of our supply chain organization that looks at supplier risk. And we help to think about those questions from a human rights perspective. That gets back to kind of what I was saying before about embedding in those existing processes. That's really where we're trying to ensure that these human rights issues are heard. And then, of course, engagement with other groups and organizations across industry is, I think, critically important, because as you said, we don't operate in a vacuum, and these type of conversations are exactly why engagement is such an important component of our approach to this work.
Yeah, that's the same for our company. From internally, we have the business code of conduct that is everybody has to certify every year to make sure that that you are certifying and understanding what this conduct is, and the same stringent the same stringent conduct guides outline are applying to our business partners. And when we are forming these partnerships, we are actually looking out for these key considerations and making sure that our business partners are following the same principles that IBM is following.
So this is a very interesting question. So I'm going to ask it, and I'll leave it open to you guys to see who wants to answer it. With the responsibility to protect human rights, what impact do you think that has on our innovation? Do you think that has any positive or negative, or what type of impact have you seen it might have on innovation?
Well, I can jump in. I think there is perhaps a natural kind of assumption that when you're trying to think about how you manage these type of human rights risks or considerations, that you might inadvertently perhaps thwart innovation or stall out progress, or perhaps a human rights team in a company might be seen as kind of the team that always says, no, 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 you can't do this. In our company, we have really tried and continue to try to make sure that that's not the case. Fundamentally, at our core, our business and human rights program is focused on enabling innovation and enabling the pace of business and helping the business to innovate and iterate. And I think part of the interesting thing that I've experienced in doing this work at Verizon is that often when we get with the engineering teams, they are our biggest ally and partner in this work. Often it's the case that when we sit down together, it's the engineers who most clearly and quickly, I would say, understand the concepts and the issues that we're trying to raise. Somebody said before, probably no engineer wants to build a tool or a product that's going to be used for some societal ill, right? Everybody wants to feel that they're contributing something positive, I think. And so that commonality between the work that we do in the human rights team and the work that our engineers are doing really brings us together. So some of the things that we've done to help drive that home are to host conversations with our engineers and bring in human rights defenders, journalists, other civil society organizations from around the world to come and sit with our engineers and talk about how they use our products on a daily basis, how they interact with our services, and to even brainstorm together about kind of what is possible. So that's sort of fundamental to our approach, but I do think it's an interesting tension, and one that teams on both sides probably need to grapple with.
So I would say that I think it drives greater innovation. So if the assumption is that privacy is a human right, so I'll go with that assumption and hedge my language since I am a lawyer. If you assume that privacy is a human right, then when we look at our company's perspective, about 3 or 4 years ago, we started to observe that states in the US were starting to identify geolocation data as privacy information. So where a product can get directly connected to a user and that information is available, we consider that geolocation. And you had states that were looking to start to regulate this from the privacy perspective. So for us, this was a game changer because we use all of that data that we receive from our products to service those products when they're in the field. So if you think about a semi that's in the middle of the Canadian Rockies and it stalls, like we need to get to that product quickly so that we can service it, tool it, and get it moving again so that you can get all those products that you want for the Christmas holidays, right? That sort of thing. But if you think about it in the context of we also use that information to drive the design of better products, for us being in the position of having to destroy that data or that information because of this privacy aspect, our company was like, well, we need this information, we need this data. So that took us in a different direction to design different applications that would enable us to segment data differently, to use other data-related tools like AI so that we could meet the standards with GDPR, where we would have to destroy data and information immediately if there was a customer request. And so I feel like in that environment, there was a regulatory standard, there was our need to have this data, have this information, and have it actually be specific enough that it was useful in our design process. And then we were able to build other innovations and products that could help us meet the regulatory requirements. And so I feel like that whole process, we're always in this environment where if there is a human rights concern that we need to embed into the design of our products, it drives our engineers to identify that problem and be more aggressive in seeking a solution.
And AI generally is, as good as the data that you're putting in. The key here is for the people who are providing that data, that they understand how their data is going to be used. Like, for example, when you look at your GPS and you're getting, information on there is a congestion ahead of you, it's not because it's magic, but because everybody's GPS submitting this data that there is, really a slowdown in this area. So try track can suggest a better route of which way to go. So this is, it's a good way of giving up your data for the greater good. But it has to be established very stringently of how this is going to be used versus tracking what exactly do you do and why are you tracking where somebody is going. There was an initiative recently in Toronto where they wanted to create this, another technology company wanted to create an area in downtown Toronto when everybody who would be going in there would be monitored and they could provide information to them based on where they're going, what they're doing. And it was meant to be like this test area. And the people of Toronto unanimously rejected that. They don't want to have this happen. They don't want to be watched all the time, and they don't want to get better, they don't want to get better service just because they're giving up this data. And this is sort of a toss-up because just like getting the information for the GPS is a good thing, but to what extent are you willing to go in providing your data to make better AI decisions, and how do you know that the data that you are providing is only used for the purpose that you are provided to? And this is why you have to have these stringent guidelines established that you have to consent that your data is going to be used in a manner, and only then companies can use that data for their innovation.
So as technology continues to evolve, getting things to market very quickly in a fast-paced environment is really important, and we got to kind of beat the competition. How do you balance getting things to market quickly and those shortened cycles of product launches with concerns related to risks and ethics and data privacy? Anyone want to take that? I have it in multiple forms of questions from the audience, so there's a lot of interest in that answer.
So I'm happy to take that. So about 2 years ago, there was, on the cover of The Economist magazine, the title, there was a picture of a diesel engine that looked not at all how our diesel engines look, but it looked very worn, torn, and it said the death of diesel. And so when that hit the shelves, I can tell you I had a lot of phone calls, primarily from my parents asking if I was going to have a job, right? Which I think was a good question. And so for a 100-year-old company, we were one of, I think there were 11 licensees, original licensees for Rudolph Diesel's diesel engine technology, and we are the only still operating licensee from that technology from like 1913. So we've doubled down on diesel, right? And so when that magazine hit the shelves, and I received all these phone calls from people saying, what's going on? What's going to happen to your company? You're 100 years old. You make diesel engines. It realized that it was a great opportunity to let people know that our company, we actually view our company, our product offerings as a power company. Like what we deliver to the marketplace is power that enables people to live their lives. And so an aspect of that is moving into what we consider to be a clean technology space where we can offer optionality to our customers for whatever product they want to use or whatever product is going to meet their regulatory environment. So if you pull from the last 18 months or 2 years and you look at what's been happening with Cummins, you'll see that we have had a lot of acquisitions, or we're doing a lot of joint development work that's enabling us to leapfrog into areas where we can provide electric vehicles, right, that can now help us reduce that carbon footprint, or we're now in the battery storage space, because for electric vehicles and having the battery storage so that you can go longer haul distances. So we're entering into all of those spaces and partnering with others, acquiring others. We just acquired a fuel cell company in Canada. It's based in Canada, one of the largest fuel cell developers, manufacturers, and sellers in the world. And so we're actually in a pretty significant acquisition stage to leapfrog and to move our company in the direction where we can provide every energy solution that a customer would want.
I would just add for our company, it goes back a little bit to what I was saying before about the ongoing human rights due diligence process that we're setting up. And the reason that's so important is that we want to be embedded in the decision-making process as it happens, not to be sort of like an add-on at the end that, you know, the human rights team comes in and then all of a sudden it clogs up the works. The idea is to make it organic and systematic so that, you know, as a product goes to launch, it's getting this checkpoint as it goes, just as a matter of course. And so that's part of how we're thinking about getting around this challenge of fast pace, because in the tech industry, you know, innovation is the name of the game, so things are going to move quickly. And this really does get at the core of kind of what a lot of human rights, business and human rights practitioners are thinking about, especially when it comes to tech and human rights in this area. The one other thing that I think is really important to kind of addressing this challenge and making sure that we're able to meet it is ensuring that these concepts of human rights and the way that you're thinking about them, and a lot of the panelists have spoken about this, is embedded in the DNA of the way that our teams work. And so I talked before about our virtual cross-functional team, our partners throughout the business. We also do trainings and briefings and information sharing sessions with engineers in our company. We've just done one with our 5G engineers. So doing more information sharing across different teams, I think within a company and also, you know, more broadly than that, is really critical to making sure that we're ready to meet this challenge of pace and scale.
Absolutely, and I just want to add to what you said. Like in my mind, being first to the market is not mutually exclusive with, you know, just ignoring human rights. You have to be first to the market in an established way where you're actually following your principle and you know, and maybe willing to give up the unfair competition and make sure that what you are representing on the market with, it's actually following these principles.
So we have a lot of folks out here who will be going to the career fair, visiting with hopefully some of your companies and looking for jobs. How do they talk about this with potential employers? What questions should they ask? How do they approach it? And how can they impact, once they get that job, I'll make this a two-part question, how can they impact how their company is acting in this manner or their policies in this manner, understanding that this is kind of still a developing area?
Well, I would say first off, just like with anything, it's so important to just educate yourself on these issues and to think about the interconnection points to the work that you're doing or your area of interest, whatever it may be. The more you begin to be steeped in kind of the human rights discourse or some of the conversations that are going on around ethical AI and other areas, I think the better off you'll be in having conversations with companies who are looking for engineers that are well-rounded and thinking about these things. Definitely come check out our Verizon booth and talk to my colleagues. And then, you know, once you get to our company, I think, or any company where you end up, you know, look for the internal people who are doing this type of work. It may, at Verizon, look like a business and human rights team. We actually have that. But the work can be done in a variety of different forms. There are people in privacy functions. There are people in engineering functions. There are people in all sorts of different areas of the business, sustainability or corporate responsibility functions who are really thinking about these issues and looking actively for partners who understand the technology and can help bridge divides of understanding and you know, discuss different concepts. So I would say, you know, do the networking internally once you get wherever you land.
I agree, and if you come visit ITW today, if you have any ideas that you would like to share, speak up, it's okay. Just share your thoughts on human rights and how we can all make better changes.
One of the advice I always give people that I mentor when they're asking, you know, what do I do in an interview? You have to take an interview consideration that it's two ways. You are in the position to ask these questions, whatever is in your mind, and make sure that you actually get an answer from the company that you are interviewing for, that you're going to be comfortable in that position or role that you are trying to do. And so feel free to ask these questions and feel free to you know, to get the answer. Once you are inside a company, we have established multiple venues of who can you talk to if you're ever in a position where you feel uncomfortable, or just not even uncomfortable, just not sure. There are different people that you can go and talk to and ask, what's happening. I see this, I don't quite understand, and help me. And then we make sure that you are actually getting your answers and your concerns are validated.
So please come visit our booth. So it would be great to talk with you all about these issues, and I will be in the booth later today. I think a couple of questions is, I like this idea of treating the conversations that you have with employers as a two-way street, and asking those tough questions. When I go down to our booth, we have a lot of folks there from our corporate communications division, and any company can prepare a glossy and make that company look like it's the best place that you want to join. And I think when you have the opportunity to talk to employees that work there, I would ask them the tough questions. I would ask them, if I join your company, what is your company's stance on human rights, and what's significant? What are the missions? What is your company's mission as stated publicly, and then how does that get embedded in how your company lives that mission? And so I think it's important to talk to the employees, because a company can have a mission, but if they empower and allow their employees to live up to that mission, they'll be able to give you examples. And so for our company, for example, we had a crowdsourcing initiative where we allowed engineering teams from around the world at our different design centers to actually contribute to a solution in building and designing a coal burning oven that would have less of an environmental impact. And then we had 16 design teams going in different environments, and they were able to do that during their own time. That's not a product that we were going to commercialize. We got patents on that product, and then we actually donated that product to a nonprofit organization so they could commercialize it and send it into the marketplace for free. And so when you talk to employers, there should be examples of that, because that's the work that when you go in, you're going to have your day-to-day work, but it's those sorts of things that I think empower employees to start being problem solvers and to be really energetic about the work that they're doing. But you have to ask those tough questions. Are you going to give me that space as an employee to do and be a part of those things, those human rights related projects and initiatives that are important?
And kind of to continue on that, one of the questions I'm keep getting a lot from a lot of our audience is from a little bit more specific examples of how your companies might have tackled a human rights or ethical issue related to design and technology. Is there any examples you could share so we understand a little bit more about how to approach the situation or how companies would go about handling it?
Well, I can share a few examples from our Verizon media unit. Sometimes when we build products that we're putting out into the market, we have to think about both how they're going to be used and the intended use of them, but also how they might be misused or otherwise abused. And a lot of that thinking, we do with the teams through our human rights function. So some of what we've done as we've worked with teams that are doing design is to think about, what is the sort of opportunity we have to disrupt behavior that might not be the type of behavior we want to encourage on our platform? Are there different product features that could create some sort of friction point? So that can include building in report abuse features or slowing down the way that certain features work, or thinking about, at times, also just how we communicate about a product and how it's used. That's some of the way that we sort of get in and work with the teams around the actual build of a product or a service that we're putting into market.
One of the reasons that we've done this bias monitoring module in our product is to make sure that we actually continue to have a handle on how the different models that we are deploying to users are actually behaving in their life cycle. And the reason it came up, because at first when we started with it, you have a new technology, you have a new innovation, and then you focus on getting the product out of make available to everybody, and you're happy that it's working and it's following principles, it's following what you trained it on. But then you start to, once it goes into production, you don't want to end up with being trained with wrong information. So you don't want to end up in a situation when your product can be used and viewed in an unfair manner. And that's why we wanted to make sure that we are building in this monitoring area. We're keeping the analytics, we're keeping all the reports of why decisions are being made, and we view this as an integral part of the product that has to continue based on all the feedback that we are getting from our customers, and we always listening to what the customers are saying and what they are saying once it's going into production, and how these models are performing on the long term. It's not enough to get to the market and have it, but it's now we get to an area where you need to monitor the long-term usage.
So at our company, we try to drive this approach of just creating and supporting an innovative environment. And so probably like most companies, we have an innovation portal internal. And so we consider every employee to be an innovator. And as part of this innovation portal, we have employees that can submit an idea. And so we have shop floor employees that can submit ideas on how they have increased the efficiency or added a safety related feature to the work that they're doing. And our approach has been, we'll put project teams on that, and we've actually had patentable inventions that come out of submissions to our innovation portal. And we take that on, we patent it, and we do it without the intention that we are going to commercialize and profit from it. We actually then will give that to some of our competitors and say, we've had this development on our shop floor. It's going to make it safer for your employees. You're in the same space that we are in. Are you interested in this innovation? So we really drive the idea that whatever role that you're in our company, we are an innovation company that's focused on making everything that we touch better. Every process, every procedure, every product, whether we're going to make money on it or not. And I think that culture and enabling our employees to have this portal where they can submit ideas and then actually putting time, resources, and other employees behind developing that, I think it gives employees a lot of job satisfaction and enjoyment in their work.
I'd like to add into your comment on the process. We have an ethics hotline that enables anyone who works within our company or a third party that works with our company who sees some practices that may be in place that are unethical or unsafe, they can bring that to our attention and we can take immediate action to resolve those. So it goes beyond just the product.
So we have about 3 minutes left. So I'd like to close out the panel by giving each of the panelists an opportunity to share a best practice, a parting thought, something we didn't get to that you'd like to share with the audience before we close up. Anybody want to start?
I can start. It's been a theme. Well, I guess I would just say, I really appreciated the fact that this panel is on the main stage here at this conference. And I think, the issues of technology and human rights are only becoming more and more intersected. And there's so much opportunity, I think, for especially engineers to be working on these issues and to thinking about them and to being proactive about them. And so I would just encourage everybody to continue your interest in this area and hopefully, become part of the next generation that really thinks about building this into the way that you work on a daily basis. We'll all benefit from that, so thank you.
I too am glad to see this as a topic because I started studying sustainability a long time ago, and at the time it was kind of one of those woo-woo type of things where everyone thought that you were just special and you need to go off and sit in a corner. So I'm happy to see that this is something that's on everyone's mind and you're thinking about it first instead of just let's get to the bottom line.
I'm actually really glad to be here. AI as a topic is near and dear to my heart, and I sort of live and breathe it. And it's great to see that there is this interest and people are, want to understand how AI works and why is this decisions being made. So I want to encourage every one of you to, keep in this area, have an interest in this area, skill up in the area, and trying to figure out what can you do and how can you apply in whatever job you are, even if you are not necessarily in designing models or designing, virtual assistants. How can you use AI in your everyday work? And what are the questions that you need to consider when you're using this AI in your own practice?
So I'd say when I was growing up and when I was thinking about career choices, I think the mantra at that time that my parents always said is find something that you love to do. And I think that's changed a little bit more. It's changed a bit where I think it's really important to find something that you love to do. But now I understand and appreciate also doing that with a company that shares your values. And if you can marry those two things together, I think it just adds to a significant level of professional enjoyment and appreciation that you can realize if you can find a company where they're walking the talk and living consistent with your values, then you won't feel compromised in your work. And I think for this topic in particular, how quickly technology is moving, how technology is being used in an unintended way, it's really important to align with a company that's going to come back to the values that they have.
I think that's some really great advice. Thank you to our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'd like to thank all of you for all the questions you submitted. I obviously couldn't get to all of them because, as you could see, I was scrolling. So thank you for your interest in this topic.